What's up, everybody? We have come back to another episode of Just in the Nick of Crime covering the Diddy trial. Please let me know, Insta and YouTube peeps, if you can hear me this go around, because last time we were having technical difficulties, but now the little thing on my monitor is lighting up saying that you guys can hear me. So hopefully you can. Let me know. Now, that being said, I'm going to talk until you guys tell me otherwise. Okay, much better. We got a confirmation on both. Fantastic. All right, so today is a pretty big day with the Diddy trial with what's going on. If you guys remember, Mia finished up yesterday, right? And we've had two people today testifying, right? And both of these people, guys, both of these people do not want to be testifying. The first guy, Eddy Garcia, who was on the stand earlier, and we're going to talk about him first, had to, on Monday, came into the courtroom and said, I'm pleading the fifth. I'm not doing this. So the judge had to grant him immunity. And now we see why. We know why he had to grant him immunity at this point in time. The next person that's coming after that was Diddy's head of finance. And he didn't want to, they didn't want to, I don't want to say he or she, I can't remember. I think it's a he. Didn't want to finance or didn't want to testify either. Okay. But before all of this got started, there has been some drama in the courtroom today. And if you're on TikTok, I got one sketch to show you guys. That's going to be on YouTube. If you're on Facebook or Insta, you're fine where you are. And it's because somebody was thrown out of the courtroom. All right. And I'm going to show that to you guys in just a moment. Now, that being said, before I get to that, let me kind of just give a quick recap of what we have coming up here. So, again, this morning, Eddy Garcia is taking the stand. He is a former security staffer at the Intercontinental Hotel, which is the hotel that famous video where Cassie was getting abused came out of. He was security there. And according to Maureen Comey, the lead prosecutor, sorry, just a second, look what you guys are saying. Okay. Here are the witnesses that are coming up in the coming days. Okay, Frank Piazza, video forensic expert, Derek Ferguson, who is a former Combs employee or former Combs employee, I'm not really sure, and Brianna Bongolan, who I think is going to be great because she was number one there for some of the abuse that Cassie endured, but allegedly Diddy held her over over the edge of a 17-story balcony. So she's going to be an interesting one. So all of that said, another accuser that could be taking the stand as soon as tomorrow afternoon, another pseudonym like Mia, this one is Jane, could also take the stand. And we know that if they have a pseudonym, their testimony is going to be absolutely damning. So I think that this week is really hitting up. It's a good week for prosecution as far as building blocks of their case. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Now, the reason they're trying to get her on quickly is she has an international flight scheduled for next Thursday. And the fact that they're trying to get her on as soon as tomorrow tells me that she's going to be on the stand for a few days at least, is what that kind of tells me. Now, before all of that started, and this, I'm going to switch to this image here real quick so you guys can see it. There it goes. I love that the sketch artist captured this. This is phenomenal. So basically, this right here occurred. She began yelling. She was in the gallery yelling, saying, quote, Diddy, these mother effers laughing at you. The judge immediately ordered court officers to remove her. Diddy turned around in his seat as the commotion unfolded, and the woman was escorted out. Separately, that was not the only incident this morning, though, guys. That was not the only one who had an incident this morning. Separately, there was another man who had been in court on Monday, and he has now been barred from returning after violating the court's very strict pseudonym order. According to prosecutors, he publicly used the real name of Mia, who was on yesterday, on his YouTube channel. He was also seen filming outside the courthouse. The judge granted the prosecution's request to ban the man from the courtroom going forward. And this all happened before testimony even began today. And I just want to address that real quick, okay? Because there's a lot of speculation on who Mia is. And I've heard names, and I'm not going to say those names. And the reason for that is because this is what we were talking about earlier. So while we had technical difficulties earlier, we were talking about this whole situation with fake news surrounding this trial and people saying like, oh, Jaguar Wright testified. Jamie Foxx came on and said this. Will Smith did this. And I bring this up because number one is on a case like this, it's so bizarre in its own, like, just natural state that you really don't need to overly sensationalize or just make things up, but people do, because as creators, we make money whether the information's true or not. And oftentimes the fake information, especially when it's incredibly clickbaity, makes a lot more money than the actual real information because it's so much more out there, so much more bizarre. Now, I say all this to say that this was the same thing going on with Mia. She did not want to testify, right? She was a nervous wreck prior to it. There were conversations in the weeks leading up to it. And everybody has gone out of their way, publications, journalists, etc., to make sure that her identity remained protected from the public, because this is stuff that she wanted to take to her grave. So the fact that somebody would go and do that, in my opinion, is just absolutely disgusting. The thing about covering this kind of stuff is that you have to be, attuned to what's going on. And you also have to be very sensitive towards the victims and the situations, because everybody who's doing all of this fake stuff and doing things like what they did to Mia, that is not having any focus on the victims. And at the end of the day, guys, whether you believe Diddy is guilty of trafficking and racketeering is irrelevant in the case that we have seen person after person and video evidence, video surveillance of the things that Diddy has done to people in his life, in his circle, to his girlfriends. He's not a good person. He's not a good human. There are victims of abuse, if nothing else. If you don't believe anything else that the prosecution has, you at least have seen enough that shows that there are victims of abuse, and it is disrespectful to all of those people. And I will get down off of my soapbox now, and now that I've said that. But yeah, so just don't do that. And I would encourage people, don't support creators who do things like that, who trauma farm, who try to just take information and like, I have an exclusive, I know who Mia is. That is so effed up. It is so effed up. Now, moving on. I'm going to put this back to this image right here. Moving on. Sorry, guys. I get sensitive about this kind of stuff, or a little fired up about this kind of stuff. Another twist in the trial, prosecutors revealed that they might try to introduce excerpts from Diddy's recorded jail calls. Remember, when you're in jail and you do phone calls when they're not with your attorney, they can record them and they can use them. And where he was heard on these jail calls, if you guys remember, planning a social media campaign around his birthday. And here is why this is important. If you have been following this with me, if you have been listening to the testimony that Mia had, talking about the fact that she had to do these scheduled happy birthday posts, this is key to the prosecution, because the prosecution is arguing that these calls directly counter the defense's narrative, which suggests that Mia, the former assistant, must be lying because she posted birthday tributes to him on social media. Prosecution said to the court, quote, "The defendant views his birthday and social media around his birthday as a marketing opportunity, as an opportunity to change the narrative." And so over 3 days of powerful testimony, Mia described years of verbal, physical, and SA, and explained to jurors that she felt forced to post for Combs' birthday because of the control that he exerted. Brian Steele, defense attorney, questioned how she could have posted about his birthday at the same time marked the first alleged SA by him. Like, hey, he just assaulted you. How could you possibly be posting something happy birthday to him? Well, because she had to. Part of her job. Prosecutors say the jail call recordings will support Mia's testimony and expose how Diddy weaponized public perception, even from behind bars. Even from behind bars. Now, the government will be filing a letter with the court on the issue, and likely those will get entered in as evidence. But it will basically break down any of what defense has by using Diddy's own words against him on that. So that's very interesting. Now, all of that said, Eddy Garcia now comes on and takes the stand. Okay, and real quick, I'm going to say this. If you are coming in late, missing this YouTube, or missing the YouTube, or you're on Insta, Facebook, whatever, TikTok, this is all recorded on YouTube. You can go there and watch the midday recap. There is a Sean Diddy Combs playlist, and I would encourage anybody who's watching on whatever platform, if you don't already follow, please tap that follow button. It's a free thing that you can do, and make sure that notifications are on, because we do these updates every single day, usually twice, midday and end of day, just so y'all are aware. Now, so Eddy Garcia took the stand, and just a quick reminder, like I said earlier at the earlier of this broadcast, he is a former security officer at the Intercontinental Hotel. He was called to the stand this morning as the next witness. Prosecutor Mitzi Steiner is the one who's led the direct examination, and he testified that he worked as a security officer at the hotel in March of 2016 when that assault on Cassie happened that we've all seen in that video. Garcia is testifying under an immunity order. On Monday, he was brought into the courtroom outside the presence of a jury where he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, saying, I'm not going to testify. I'm invoking the Fifth. I'm pleading the Fifth. I don't want to testify. I'm here under subpoena, but this is what's going on. In response, Judge Subramanian signed an immunity order to compel Garcia to testify, meaning that, hey, you can testify and you will be immune from anything criminal that you did involving this. Any crimes that you committed during this, you have immunity. The judge granted him that because of what he had to say. And we were wondering what he had to say, and now we know why, and we're going to get into that in literally a second. Just as a quick reminder, though, he is not the only one who had to be given an immunity order to testify. George Kaplan, who was one of Diddy's former assistants, also invoked his Fifth Amendment right earlier in the trial and was compelled to testify under immunity. So now Eddy Garcia takes a stand. He testified that he worked alongside Israel Flores, who testified earlier, at the Intercontinental Hotel in March of 2016. Flores, who was also a hotel security employee at the time, was the first witness to testify in the trial. Garcia told the court that while he and Flores no longer work together, they do remain friends. He said that he became aware that Flores had testified in the trial because he saw a TikTok video about it. However, Garcia stated the two had not discussed the content in their respective testimonies. Garcia also added that as of March 16, he had been working at the International Continental Hotel for a few months, and at that time, he was 24 years old. Eddy testified that by March of 2016, sorry, I just read that, sorry. On March 5th of 2016, there we go, his shift began at 2 p.m. He told the court that during his shift, he was informed that there had been a domestic dispute at the hotel. Garcia said that when he reviewed the surveillance video in the incident, he did not initially recognize the individuals involved. It was only later that he learned the people captured on the footage were Sean Diddy Combs, Puff Daddy himself, and Cassie Ventura. Garcia further testified that to his knowledge, law enforcement was not called to the scene. He stated that it was his understanding that this was because Ms. Ventura did not request the presence of police or medical attention. Then, he talks about how he received the phone call. Okay, then on March 5th, about 90 minutes into his shift, he received a phone call at the hotel security desk, 90 minutes after he started his shift. And on the line was somebody that we were talking about a few minutes ago on TikTok, Christina Coram, or Cram, KK. Diddy's chief of staff, so to speak, the Ghislaine Maxwell Diddy, if you will. And she identified herself as Diddy's personal assistant. Garcia and Coram said Coram was asked him if he was familiar about an incident that occurred earlier that day. And she then asked, is there any possible way to get a copy of the video or see the video? Garcia testified that Coram explained that she wanted access to the video because, quote, Mr. Combs had been intoxicated and didn't remember. So already kind of doing a PR spin on that. And before Garcia could elaborate on what Combs allegedly did not remember, the judge sustained an objection and the attorneys moved to a sidebar discussion. So we don't know what happened from that. Later that day, Garcia, but then when it comes back, later that day, Garcia said he spoke to Coram again by phone. He told her that she would need to contact hotel management or obtain a subpoena to access the video. Approximately an hour after that call, Garcia received a message from the hotel operator that a woman was in the lobby looking for him. Garcia then testified that Coram had shown up, wanted to meet him in person, and once again requested to see the footage, stating that she wanted to know what they were dealing with. Garcia again refused and advised her to go through hotel management or the subpoena process. He also admitted that he told her informally off the record that it's bad. Yeah, we know you want to see this. We know you want to do damage control. Off the record, though, it's bad. And we've seen it. We know how bad it is. Later that night, Garcia said the hotel security desk received another phone call, this time from a New York area code. And it was, again, Christina Coram on the line. But this time she told Garcia that someone wanted to speak with him, and she handed the phone directly to Sean Combs himself. According to Garcia, Combs sounded very nervous, was talking very fast, and told Garcia that he had had a little too much to drink and that Garcia knew how things was. Garcia testified that Combs directly asked him to provide a copy of the surveillance video, allegedly telling him that if this got out, it could ruin him. Garcia then refused again, telling Combs to contact hotel management or pursue a subpoena if he wished to obtain the footage. He then testified that after the initial phone calls with Combs and his chief of staff, KK, he sent an email to the hotel's general manager and head of security. In the email, he notified them about the phone calls from Combs' team and explained that Combs had requested a meeting with hotel management to discuss the incident and the surveillance video. Garcia testified that Combs had expressed concern about the video. Later that evening, while Garcia was at home, he received another phone call on his cell phone from KK, a number that he had not given to either Christina Koram or Sean Combs. They tracked it down. Garcia testified that the unexpected call made him feel nervous. And then once again, on that phone call, after hours, after work, on a number that he didn't give them, Christina passes the phone call back to Diddy. During this call, personal phone call, Garcia testified that Combs told him, "You sound like a good guy. You sound like you want to help. Something like this could ruin me." He said Combs expressed concern that the video might get out and damage his career. Garcia said that Combs apologized, saying he knew Garcia did not have direct access to the video, but reiterated that he believed Garcia could make it happen, saying, quote, "He again stated that I sounded like I wanted to help and he believed I could make it happen." He further testified that during the call, Combs told him he would take care of me, which Garcia understood would be a financial offer. Following this call, Garcia said he contacted his boss to tell him that Combs was willing to pay for the video. After a pause, Garcia's boss responded that he would do it for $50,000, meaning $50,000. Garcia's boss would come up with the video and get it to him. 50 grand. So Garcia calls Coram back. Now we know. See, guys, now we know why he had to have immunity to testify. So he calls Christina Koram back. He calls KK back. She answers. She passed the phone again to Diddy. Garcia informed Sean Combs the video could be provided for $50,000. Combs responded enthusiastically, saying, quote, "Eddie, my angel, I knew you could help. I knew you could do it. Eddie, my angel, I knew you could help. I knew you could do it." Garcia testified that the following day, his boss went to the hotel servers, downloaded the surveillance footage onto a USB thumb drive, and gave it to Garcia to deliver to Combs himself. Garcia said he contacted KK again and told her he had the USB drive. KK then passed the phone to Puff, who sounded happy, sounded excited, and asked how quickly Garcia could bring it to him. Combs provided Garcia with an address and seemed eager to receive the video as soon as possible, again calling him Eddie, my angel, during the call. Garcia's boss instructed him to go to the address and tell any other hotel officer that he was running an errand on his behalf. When Garcia arrived at the high-rise building Combs had specified, he called KK from the lobby. A man who identified himself as one of Combs' security guards escorted Garcia up to a room on the upper floor. Garcia testified that when he entered the room, Combs appeared very pleased. He was smiling, excited, looked happy. He referred to him again as Eddie, my angel, and welcomed him warmly, making an effort to put Garcia at ease. He said, "At the time, I was very nervous. My voice kept cracking." He said Combs noticed and seemed unwell and he seemed unwell and offered him tea. Garcia said he wasn't sure if he liked tea, and Combs told KK, "Go get him that tea that I like." Then he testified that during the private meeting, when delivering that USB thumb drive, Combs took the USB and left the room for several minutes without explanation. When Combs returned, Garcia then immediately asked whether that was the only existing copy of the video, and Garcia told Combs that he believed that it was. He said it had to be the only copy, that he didn't want it getting out, and if I was sure nothing was on the cloud. To confirm, Garcia said he contacted his boss, who assured him that the video had been deleted from the hotel server and that the USB was now the sole copy. Garcia relayed that confirmation back to Combs. Combs then testified that he expressed concern about what might happen if Cassie later filed a police report regarding the incident. He said, "I don't have to worry about that she knew about it and she wanted the video gone too." To reinforce this, Combs then initiated a FaceTime call with Cassie Ventura. All right. Cassie was on the screen. She was wearing a hoodie and the lighting was poor, but it said that it was Cassie. Combs passed the phone to Garcia. Garcia testified that Combs directed Cassie to speak. Say, quote, "Let him know that you want this to go away too." That's what Combs said to Cassie, according to Garcia. And on the call, Cassie says to him that she had a movie coming out. It wasn't a good time for this to come out, as she wanted this to go away. Garcia described her demeanor on the brief video call as normal. Garcia also testified that Combs sought additional assurances of loyalty from everybody involved. He asked Garcia to provide, this is key, guys. Asked Garcia to provide identification for himself, for Garcia's boss, and for Israel Flores, the hotel security officer who initially responded to the incident. According to Garcia, Combs said this only works if we're all on the same page. Garcia told Combs he was nervous about this request, explaining that Flores was a very by-the-book guy and unlikely to cooperate. He said, knowing that Mr. Flores, he's by the book, he's a very by-the-book guy, that's just not something he would do. Garcia said that after this conversation, he told his boss about Combs' request for that ID and voiced his concern that Flores would not be on board. His boss replied that another officer who had been on duty that day would cooperate instead. Garcia then testified that he texted pictures of the IDs to Combs as requested, then had Combs sign an NDA with a $1 million penalty clause. $1 million penalty clause. And he paid $100,000 in cash. After receiving the confirmation that he now possessed the only remaining copy of the surveillance video, he had Eddy sign this paperwork related to the transfer. Eddy testified that the documents included a declaration stating that it was the only existing copy of the video in an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. The jury was shown photos of the signed documents, which were dated March 7th and printed on official Combs Company letterhead, listing the company's New York office address. This is big, and I'm going to come back to this in a second. Garcia testified that he did not read the documents carefully before signing them. I was nervous. I was in a rush to get out of there. He also stated that he was not given copies of the paperwork. One portion of the NDA, which was read aloud in court, stated, quote, recipient understands that Combs is a highly prominent recording artist, entertainer, and entrepreneur, and his privacy and confidentiality, and his privacy and the confidentiality of the confidential information is of material concern. Another section of the NDA included a penalty clause for breach, saying, quote, accordingly, without limitation of companies and or Combs' rights as they relate to injunctive relief detailed above, recipient agrees to pay company the sum of $1 million as liquidated damages in the event of a breach of this agreement. Now, at the time, Garcia worked as a security guard, earning $10.50 an hour, right? So when you talk about the money involved in this, what he's offering to pay, and number one, what you have on the NDA, he's never going to come up with $1 million. That's more money he's going to be able to earn, in years of working, especially at $10.50 an hour. And the money that Combs is offering him is life-changing. $100,000, 50 of which has to go to his boss, and we're going to talk about the split in a minute. But that's life-changing money for a lot of people, especially somebody who's making $10 an hour, right? Now, following the signing of the documents, Garcia testified that Combs grabbed the papers and left the room. When he returned, he was carrying a brown bag and a money counter. Garcia testified that Combs proceeded to run $100,000 through the machine, counting it in stacks of 10 grand at a time. Garcia explained that the hotel had previously told Combs that his boss would do it for $50,000, so he assumed the additional 50 was intended for himself and Israel Flores, who was the responding officer again. But again, Flores ultimately was a by-the-book guy and was not involved in receiving any of these funds. So Garcia testified that another security guard was present in the room during the money counting, and that KK, the former chief of staff, was coming in and out of the room and likely saw the cash being counted. After Combs finished counting the money, he asked Garcia if he wanted to verify the count himself. Garcia declined, telling Combs that he trusted the machine. As Garcia stood to leave, Combs offered to walk him out, an offer that Garcia testified made him nervous. Combs walked Garcia down to the lobby and requested that both of their cars be brought around. During this time, Combs asked Garcia how he planned to spend the money and advised him not to make any large purchases. Once he was in his car, Garcia testified that he called his boss, Bill Medrano, and kept an eye out to ensure he was not being followed. That basically, this is how the $100,000 was broken down. $50,000 of it went to Bill Medrano, Garcia's boss. He's the one who copied the security footage to the cloud, or from the server, to a thumb drive and deleted it from the servers. $20,000 went to Henry Elias, who was another who was on the officer, but not on duty, but not Israel Flores. And then $30,000 Garcia kept for himself, which he used to purchase a used car in cash. He testified he did not deposit any of the money into a bank account, nor did he report it on his taxes. Then, about 1 or 2 weeks later, Garcia said that he noticed on the original incident report, and the attached surveillance footage were no longer present on the hotel security computer. He testified that he chose not to report that disappearance to anyone because doing so would draw more attention to the situation and they needed to go away. Then, several weeks after he provided Diddy the sole copy of this footage, Combs reached out to him again. He contacted him around Easter and opened the call by saying, "Happy Easter, Eddy, my angel." God, that's so cringe. "Happy Easter, Eddy, my angel. God is good. God put you in my way for a reason." Then Combs asked him if anybody had inquired about the incident or the video in the time since he had obtained it. And he testified that no, he hadn't heard anything. He ended the call by saying, "If you ever need anything, let me know. Let me know." So he decides to reach out to him later. Around 2017, 2018, he reached out to Diddy via Instagram, asking whether he had any work coming up, any work opportunities for him when he was in Los Angeles. Diddy never responded to him. That was it. The last communication was that call around Easter. Then the video resurfaces, right? Eddy testified that after the hotel surveillance video resurfaced in the media in 2024, he discussed the situation with two of his former colleagues, both Israel Flores and Henry Elias. Shortly afterwards, in June of 24, Garcia was contacted by law enforcement about the incident. He admitted to the court that during his initial conversation with investigators, he was not honest about his own involvement in the situation. Following that meeting with law enforcement, Garcia testified that he deleted messages he had exchanged with Flores and Elias about the matter. So they were text messages and he deleted them. Later in 2024, Garcia was appointed his own legal counsel to meet again with the government. During that meeting, he disclosed for the first time that Combs had paid him for the video. Garcia testified that he was truthful during that meeting and all subsequent meetings with prosecutors. Now, that was direct, okay? And before we get into cross, I want to address something because, guys, this is big. What we're talking about here, this is big, all right? Because he commits this abuse to Cassie. That's domestic violence, right? You could call it trafficking, possibly that's what they're trying to build towards, but we know that it's DV for sure, 100%. Nobody's arguing that. He harasses and stalks the security guard, calling him on his home number, which he didn't give him. Brings him to the office, pays a guy $50,000 and another $50,000 for the other people involved to split. Pays money to make this disappear, to obtain the only copy. Makes him sign paperwork on letterhead, company letterhead, which now directly links it. They have evidence of this. All the documents directly links him hiding this. Criminal activities, hiding criminal activities, bribery, the abuse of Cassie, intimidation, all of that linked directly to Bad Boy Enterprises. All of that is your RICO. That is a huge building block in the RICO case that they're doing for him. And again, real quick side note before we get into cross-examination, because that's coming up, we're going to talk about next. If you came in late watching this on TikTok or Instagram or anywhere else, this is recorded on YouTube. You can go back to the beginning and watch it. It's all there. We always do these recaps like this on there and on Substack typically. So very, very interesting. So now cross begins. Direct questioning is done. They pull up Brian Steele again. He was the one who was questioning Mia yesterday, and he is leading the cross-examination of Eddy Garcia, the former Intercontinental Hotel security officer. So during cross, Steele begins to question Eddy about his feelings regarding the transaction with Diddy. Steele asked Garcia whether he had got a good feeling about Combs, who Steele suggested had acted professionally during the exchange. Then this is despite Garcia testifying that after leaving the meeting, he was checking his rearview mirror to see if Combs or anyone else might be following. But he did agree that he did feel good about the transaction. Steele then reviewed portions of the NDA that Garcia had signed, and which Eddy had testified that he had not fully read at the time. Steele focused on a section of the NDA that spelled out circumstances under which Garcia could disclose the confidential information to law enforcement or other government bodies without breaching the agreement. Sorry, guys, we live in a house. We have a dog that's insane. He's barking right now. If you can hear it, my apologies. But if he could disclose basically, he focused on a section of the NDA that spelled out circumstances under which Garcia could disclose the confidential information to law enforcement or other government bodies without breaching the agreement. However, the clause required that Garcia notify Combs' company if such a disclosure were to occur. Steele pointed out that the NDA included a non-disparagement agreement. Steele then concluded his cross-examination. Mitzi took over for redirect, and that was pretty much it. Nothing really to write home about that. Now, next person that we have coming up is Derek Ferguson. Okay, so Derek Ferguson is the former head of finance for Combs Enterprises. He is the witness who is on the stand right now. And prosecutor Cassie Slavic is going to be the one who is leading the direct examination. And before I get into what we know so far prior to lunch, I just want to kind of give you, because we're talking about a lot of stuff that's really building this case, right? And I'm going to tell you guys why I think this is where things are going to get really interesting. Because as of now, the prosecution's racketeering conspiracy argument feels still kind of thin. I think that Ed did a really good job building on that. And yes, we have heard a lot about the predicate crimes. We've heard about false imprisonment, forced labor, arson, likely obstruction of justice. But what we haven't really heard is, what is the criminal enterprise? How was it structured? How was it run? What are the methods and means behind it? And that's why I think watching the testimony of Derek Ferguson is going to be really interesting, because, again, he was the head of finance. Money went through him. This could be a pivotal moment in this case. Because remember, in the indictment, the government is arguing that Combs's businesses were really fronts for this larger racketeering conspiracy. So if Ferguson can provide inside testimony about how the finances were used, how the businesses operated, and whether they knowingly supported or facilitated the criminal activity, it could shore up the prosecution's case and give the jury the enterprise element that they're going to need to convict racketeering. Because here's a quick reminder: to convict on racketeering, the government has to prove, 1, this was a criminal enterprise; 2, it affected interstate commerce; 3, the defendant was associated with or employed by the enterprise; 4, the defendant engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity; and 5, the defendant committed at least 2 acts of racketeering activity. And like I said, so far they've done a pretty solid job showing the pattern of criminal activity, but the enterprise piece, there's still a gap there. And if Ferguson delivers, that gap could be closed so fast. So fast. Now, let's talk about what we have prior to them going to lunch, okay? So he takes a stand, right? He told the jury right off the bat that he's testifying today because he was subpoenaed. He's another person who does not want to be there. He was not going to come here on the own. He's there because he has to be there. He says that he worked for Diddy and his companies from 1998 all the way through 2017. So you're talking about somebody who has nearly 20 years of moving Diddy's money in the companies. And absolutely insane. So Ferguson said that he started with Combs's enterprise. When he first started, he was interacting with Diddy pretty regularly, a couple times a week. But as the company grew and more professional management was brought in, those interactions became less frequent. Depending on who was in the place at the time, Ferguson either reported the company's president, or when no president was in place, Diddy himself directly. One key detail: Ferguson testified that both he and Diddy were signatories on the company's business bank accounts during his time there. So right now, Cassie Slavic is walking him through a review of those bank records, going over various business accounts tied to Combs's different entities. All right, let me see real quick if there was anything else that happened that I need to tell you guys about before we went to lunch, because I was kind of doing this as we came in. So yeah, there is a couple more things. Let me pull this out and I'll look at this real quick. Sorry. So Ferguson testified that Combs would charge his business and personal expenses on his card from time to time. He said members of his team would determine which business or entity a charge pertained to, and then use that business account to pay off that charge. He then testified that cash payments were an industry norm 20 years ago, saying that it was not uncommon, especially during his early years working for Combs, that performers would be paid in cash, and a performance manager would at times bring cash to the finance department to be processed. So that's a really good way for him to be able to move money. You know, hey, it's cash. This is how we paid an artist, but that money really go to something else, you know. He also said that he was not aware that Combs' security carried cash for him, saying it was not something I paid attention to. During his tenure, he said there were periods where third parties were engaged to handle Combs' personal finances, and other times it was internally managed. And that's where they break from lunch, right? So, anyways, somebody said if any of these people are receiving money or doing media for money, it's irrelevant. Nobody's receiving money for their testimony. That's been asked on everybody, and not a single person is receiving any favors to testify. Nobody's receiving any money. So that's what we have for the midday recap, guys. I think today is going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be really damning, depending on what's going on. We have a few other people coming up. Again, we have another pseudonym, you know, a Jane. We don't know what her position was at this point in time, but we have some very interesting people coming up that I think is going to to be quite interesting on what we're going to get. I think that Derek Ferguson is going to be on the stand for the rest of the day, so we're going to get a lot more information after lunch, and they hope to have him finished up today. Now, that being said, that's what we have. Again, if you came in late, you can catch up with this on YouTube or Substack. If you are following on Insta, YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok, please hit that follow button if you don't already. And have a great rest of the day. TikTok, you guys don't go anywhere. Bye, guys.